On July 28, 1927, the world's fastest swimmer was halfway through a 5-mile training run when a sudden squall flipped a crowded excursion boat near Chicago, sending 50 people into freezing water. Johnny Weissmuller wasn't there for Hollywood glory. He dove in to save lives. For decades, few believed he'd really pulled off 11 rescues, until forgotten records told the truth. The consequences of that storm, who lived and who was lost, and why almost no one remembers, start with how a world champion ended up in the right place at the worst possible moment. At just 23 years old, Johnny Weissmuller was already a living legend in the water. He had shattered the 100-meter freestyle world record, clocking in at 57.4 seconds, a time no other man had ever reached. Since 1921, no one had beaten him in a single sanctioned freestyle race. By 1927, he had collected 5 Olympic gold medals and more than 60 world records, but his daily routine was anything but easy. Training for the Chicago River Marathon, Johnny pushed himself through 5 to 10 miles of open water each morning. He often braved unpredictable winds and currents off North Avenue Beach. The water was a second home. He knew its moods, its sudden drops in temperature, its hidden dangers. He swam alongside his brother Peter, keeping a steady pace as the city faded behind them. For Weissmuller, these long swims were more than preparation. They were a test of everything he had built: speed, strength, and the ability to keep going when every muscle screamed to stop. In the calm before the storm, his body was at its absolute peak, ready for anything the lake could throw at him. If stories like this matter to you, real heroism that history forgot, subscribe to this channel and help us keep bringing these truths to light. At 3:30 in the afternoon, Lake Michigan turned violent without warning. The Favorite, a wooden excursion steamer built decades earlier, was packed with families and children enjoying a cheap summer cruise. In less than 2 minutes, a squall with near cyclonic force swept across the water, hammering the boat with wind and rain. Witnesses later said, the Favorite rolled so suddenly that passengers on the upper deck were hurled into the lake, while those below were plunged into darkness as water flooded the lower cabins. The vessel capsized completely, trapping dozens beneath its hull. In the chaos, heavy clothing and panic made swimming nearly impossible. The surface temperature hovered just above 62 degrees Fahrenheit, cold enough to sap strength and coordination in minutes. Most on board had only seconds to react before the cold and the waves began to take their toll. From shore, people could hear desperate cries as the Favorite turned over. According to the Chicago Tribune, women and children clung to the hull before vanishing beneath the waves. With the boat half a mile offshore, the distance to safety was daunting even for strong swimmers. For many, there was no chance to escape the overturned wreck. The water, the wind, and the failing boat created a disaster that would demand immediate, extraordinary action from anyone close enough to help. Johnny Weissmuller and his brother Peter did not hesitate. They cut through the churning water, fighting 4 to 6 foot waves, closing the 200-yard gap to the overturned steamer. The capsized hull loomed above them, battered by wind and spray. Johnny dove beneath the upturned boat, slipping into darkness where trapped passengers gasped for air in pockets no bigger than closets. Meant risking entanglement, debris, or being pinned by shifting wreckage. He surfaced with a child clinging to his neck, then a woman unable to speak, then another. Each time the lake grew colder and the screams grew fainter. The rescue was relentless. Johnny swam a victim out, handed them to Peter or to others who had arrived, then turned and plunged back toward the hull. He repeated this again and again, never pausing, never looking for help. The physical demand was staggering. Each round trip out to the wreck and back to the edge of safety meant towing a panicked, half-drowned person through water cold enough to numb fingers in minutes. His arms and legs burned. His breath grew ragged, yet he kept diving. By the time the official rescue boats reached the scene, Johnny had pulled 11 people from the capsized Favorite. Among them was Mary Donahue, age 67, who later remembered, "I was trapped underwater. Everything was dark. Then I felt hands grab me and pull. It was the swimmer boy. He saved my life. Johnny's total distance in those minutes added up to nearly 3 miles in open water, most of it spent dragging bodies through waves that would have stopped almost anyone else. Every life he brought to the surface was a battle against time, cold, and exhaustion. For those 11, the difference between life and death was measured by the reach of one man's arms and the strength left in his lungs. The numbers that followed the disaster read like a cold ledger, but behind each entry was a life forever changed or lost. The Coast Guard's official report logged their arrival at the scene 15 minutes after the favorite rolled over. By then, the water was already littered with debris and silent bodies. Out of everyone on board, only 23 survived. 27 were gone, most of them children and women, some lost in seconds, others slipping away before help could reach them. The coroner's records from Cook County would later confirm the grim arithmetic. 16 children, 10 women, and 1 man, ages ranging from 4 to 71. The impact of the Weissmuller brothers' actions stands out starkly against the records. Biographers and contemporary accounts agree. 11 people owed their lives directly to Johnny's rescues. Without him and Peter, the death toll would have climbed to 38, nearly every passenger. Instead, the cold math reveals a different outcome. 40% of those who might have died made it home. The numbers alone can't capture the cost. Among those Johnny saved was Anna Kowalski, pulled from under the hull and gasping for air. Her sister Helen, trapped just feet away, didn't survive. For every name on the survivor list, there's another on the coroner's sheet, a reminder that survival and loss were separated by seconds, strength, and the reach of a single swimmer. The statistics, stark as they are, tell a story of what might have been if not for one man's refusal to let the lake claim more lives. Doctors at Passavant Hospital treated Johnny for exhaustion and warned him not to compete again so soon. His muscles were shot, and he had lost 8 pounds in just 2 days. Despite every medical warning, he showed up at the Chicago River Marathon as planned. When the starting gun fired, he swam with the same battered body that had pulled survivors from Lake Michigan. He finished more than 4 minutes ahead of the next swimmer. After the race, he said quietly, "I kept thinking about the ones we couldn't save. Had to finish for them." On August 3rd, 1927, the city of Chicago honored Johnny Weissmuller with the key to the city. 5,000 people crowded the ceremony, not to celebrate Olympic medals, but to recognize the lives he had saved from Lake Michigan. Yet when Hollywood cast him as Tarzan just a few years later, the studios left that day out of his story. Publicity campaigns fixated on his athletic records and the Tarzan yell, while the rescue faded from the spotlight. Decades later, his son wrote that Johnny would wake in the night shouting, reliving the disaster. After 1927, he gave free swimming lessons to Chicago children, pushed for safer schools, and requested that at his funeral donations go to the YMCA swimming programs instead of flowers. The impact of those 11 rescues lives on, not just in headlines, but in generations that followed. History often celebrates the legends, but it is the verified courage, documented in forgotten archives, that shapes real lives. Today, dozens of descendants exist because one man acted, not performed. Heroism is not always the story we are told. Sometimes, it is the one we almost never hear. Subscribe for more untold truths.